My parents said there wasn't room for me at the annual family retreat. Then they invited 118 people, all 6 of my siblings, their families, in-laws, cousins, and even friends. I stayed silent and took action instead. 9 hours later, my mom was yelling. The email had landed on a Tuesday morning, while I was going through quarterly reports at my desk. The subject line read, Thompson Family Retreat 2025. Important update. Right then I should have realized something was off, because my mom never used that stiff corporate tone unless she was hiding something. It was cold, formal. Nothing like her usual messages overflowing with emojis and exclamation points. Dear Megan, it started, a warning sign all by itself. She never called me Dear Megan unless she was about to sugarcoat something unpleasant. We finalized arrangements for this year's retreat at Mountain Ridge Resort. Unfortunately, due to capacity constraints, we won't be able to accommodate you and Ryan this year. We know you'll understand. The resort has strict fire codes and we've reached our limit. We'll miss you. Love, Mom and Dad. I read it 3 times, then again, each pass making the whole thing sound even more ridiculous. Capacity constraints. At the same retreat that had comfortably held our full extended family for 15 years, the same place where my parents rented out the entire resort every single time. Every cabin, every room, practically every inch of the property. My hand shook as I picked up my coffee mug. Ryan glanced up from his laptop across the home office. What's going on? He asked. I just turned my monitor toward him. He scanned the email, and his face went from confused to stunned to furious in half a minute. Are they serious? Capacity constraints? Megan, we were there last year. There were 80 people? Maybe 90. The place was massive. We had empty cabins. I know. Ryan pushed back his chair and started pacing. This is unbelievable. You're their daughter. Their 3rd kid. How in the world is there suddenly no space for you? I had no answer. My mind was already racing, and none of the explanations looked good. Things had been tense between my parents and me, ever since I chose to go into corporate law instead of joining the family's real estate business. They'd never let go of the idea that I'd betrayed them, but shutting me out of the family retreat was a brand new level of hurt. I'm calling them, Ryan said, grabbing his phone. Don't. The word burst out sharper than I meant. Just don't. He stopped and studied my face. After 8 years of marriage, he could read me better than I could read myself. What are you thinking? He asked carefully. I'm thinking I want to see the guest list. My youngest sister, Tina, had always been the family's unofficial broadcaster. She couldn't keep a secret if she tried, which made her the perfect person to reach out to. I texted her like it was nothing, saying I heard the retreat was going to be their biggest one yet. She replied within minutes, excited as ever. OMG, yes. Mom said we're having like 120 people this year. Dad's bringing his golf buddies. Aunt Carol's dragging her book club. Eli's in-laws are coming. Sophie's inviting her college roommates. It's gonna be wild. 120 people. My parents somehow had no room for their own daughter and her husband but made sure Eli's in-laws, people we barely knew, got spots. And Sophie's college roommates? Total strangers. Something cold settled behind my ribs. This wasn't about space. This was intentional. Ryan looked at Tina's message from over my shoulder. You've got to be kidding me. I need the full list, I said quietly. And how exactly are you going to get that? He asked. I tried to smile, though it probably came out as more of a strained smirk. Mom's assistant, Janet. She runs all the retreat logistics. We grabbed lunch last month, and she mentioned how overwhelmed she was with the huge crowd this year. Janet met me at a little downtown cafe 3 days later. She looked completely worn out, her usually tidy hair shoved into a messy bun, dark circles smudging beneath her eyes. Thank God you called, she said, practically falling into the chair across from me. Your mother is driving me up the wall over this retreat. She keeps changing her demands. Yesterday she decided she wanted an ice sculpture of your dad's face. An ice sculpture, Megan, at a mountain resort in July. I ordered her a large latte and a pastry. I can imagine. How many people are you juggling now? 118 last I counted. Though your mom keeps adding folks. Last night she invited the woman who does her eyebrows. Janet rubbed her temples. I shouldn't complain, your family pays me well. But this is beyond anything we've handled before. 118 confirmed guests. Yeah. Would have been 120 with you and Ryan, but she trailed off, uncomfortable. But they uninvited me, I said, finishing the thought for her. Janet's cheeks reddened. I'm really sorry, Megan. I felt awful when your mom told me to send that email. I even tried hinting that there was more than enough space, but she insisted the resort couldn't legally fit everyone. Can I ask you something? Off the record? She hesitated, then nodded. Is the resort actually full? Like genuinely full? Janet looked down at her coffee. The resort can hold up to 200 people. Your family booked 118 spots. There are 82 empty beds. Hearing it out loud hit me like a punch, even though part of me already knew. They had flat out lied. They shut me out on purpose while inviting golf buddies and book club members and college friends of siblings who barely talked to me. I see, I said quietly. Megan, I really am sorry. And if it makes any difference, I think what they're doing is terrible. You've always been kind to me. Your mother, she stopped herself. No, please. Just say it. Janet took a slow sip of her latte. Your mom talks sometimes. Lately she's been saying you're too independent, too focused on your career. She thinks you look down on the family business. Last week she said you needed to be taught a lesson about family loyalty. A lesson about family loyalty. By shutting me out of our own family gathering. The irony would have almost been funny if it hadn't cut so deep. I thank Janet for being upfront with me and for taking the time to meet. As we got ready to leave, I asked her one last thing. The resort reservation, it's under my parents' names, right? Actually, she said, it's tied to the family trust. The Thompson Family Trust. Your dad set it up forever ago for tax reasons. All 7 of you kids are beneficiaries. 7 kids, including me. That cold heaviness in my chest shifted into something sharper and a whole lot clearer. I spent the entire weekend digging. The Thompson Family Trust documents were filed with the county, and as both a beneficiary and a trustee, I had full legal access to every record connected to it. It took a bit of effort, but eventually I found everything I was looking for. The trust held a substantial set of assets, commercial buildings, rental properties, long-term investments. It brought in a steady income that was paid out quarterly to my parents as managers. But the trust language spelled things out plainly. Any expense billed to the trust had to serve the benefit of everyone involved. All 7 kids were trustees. My parents were trustees. They managed the trust, sure, but they didn't have the power to spend those funds however they pleased unless the costs aligned with legitimate trust purposes or were approved by the trustees. The family retreat had always been charged to the trust as a beneficiary gathering, something meant to promote unity, which was fine back when every beneficiary was included. But if Ryan and I were deliberately shut out while the trust financed the entire event, that was another story entirely. That crossed into possible breach of fiduciary duty. I opened the financials next. What started 15 years ago as a simple state park picnic had exploded into this massive yearly production. Last year's retreat came in at $47,000. This year's early budget showed $72,000, all coming straight from trust funds. $72,000 for a trip I wasn't even allowed to attend. I was still at my desk surrounded by paper stacks and legal pads scribbled with notes when Ryan walked in. You're building a case, he said. I'm evaluating my options, I replied. You don't have to take this on. We could just forget it and plan a vacation somewhere else that week. I looked at him. Would you, if your parents pulled something like this? He actually paused to think, something I loved about him. Ryan never brushed off my feelings or rushed past the hard parts. No, he said finally. I'd be furious. But your family, they can be vicious when they want to be. If you hit back legally, there's no undoing it. They were vicious first. They chose to embarrass me, freeze me out and lie about it, all while using money I legally share. I know. I'm just making sure you're ready for whatever comes next. I thought about my siblings. Adam, the oldest, was always Dad's favorite, the heir apparent to the real estate empire, never understanding why I'd want anything different. Eli was driven and combative, always looking to outdo everyone. Sophie followed whatever opinion was loudest in the room. Daniel tried to avoid conflict to the point where he barely counted as present. Leah drifted and let other people steer her. And Tina, the youngest, was still figuring out who she was in all the chaos. Not one of them had contacted me. Not one had asked why I wasn't going. Either they didn't notice, didn't care, or worse, silently agreed with the decision. I'm ready, I told Ryan. They want to lecture me about loyalty? Fine. Let's have that conversation. Sunday morning, I built a detailed timeline, 15 years of retreats cross-checked with trust expenditures. The pattern stood out immediately. Every year the cost rose. Every year it was marked as benefiting all trustees. Every year, every one of us was invited. Until this one. While combing through older paperwork, I found something that made me sit up straighter. When my grandfather created the trust 3 decades ago, he included explicit rules about family unity and equal treatment. There was even a line stating that events funded by the trust must reflect the grantor's commitment to treating all beneficiaries with equal dignity and inclusion. My grandfather had been strict, but he valued fairness. He would have hated what my parents were doing. I took screenshots of that clause. It was going to come in handy. Sunday afternoon, I called my brother Daniel. Out of all my siblings, he was the one most likely to give me a straight answer without dramatics. Hey, he said, sounding thrown off. Everything okay? I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest. Sure, he said, though he suddenly sounded nervous. Did you know I wasn't invited before I found out? Silence. Then he said, Mom mentioned it at dinner a couple weeks ago, and nobody said anything. Nobody pushed back? Adam said something about how you've been distant. Sophie nodded along. Dad said it was a tough choice, but they had to do what was best for family harmony. Eli muttered that you always act like you're above everyone. Each sentence felt like another sting. And you? What did you think? Daniel let out a long breath. Honestly, I did think it was wrong. But you know how Mom and Dad get. Arguing with them just blows things up. I kind of assumed maybe you chosen not to go. Why would I choose that? I don't know, Em. You haven't really been around much. You skipped Adam's birthday. You didn't come to Leah's baby shower. From their perspective, maybe it seemed like you were already withdrawing. His words hit harder than I wanted to admit, because there was some truth in them. I had pulled back. After years of being criticized for my career, judged for leaving the family business, and treated like an outsider, I started protecting myself by showing up less. But staying away now and then doesn't justify being cut out completely. Daniel, you need to hear me on this. Missing a few events doesn't mean I don't want to be part of the family. And it definitely doesn't give them the right to kick me out of the retreat while inviting more than 100 other people. When you put it like that, yeah, it sounds terrible. It is terrible. It's worse than terrible, and I'm not going to pretend any part of it is fine. So what are you planning to do? I hesitated for a moment. Daniel hated conflict, but he wasn't blindly loyal to our parents. He could think for himself. I'm going to fix this, I finally said. But it's going to get uncomfortable for everyone involved. And just talk to them. Try to work it out. Don't blow this up bigger than it needs to be. They blew it up the moment they cut me out. I'm just responding in kind. After I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. My family had made my position crystal clear. I ranked below golf buddies, below book club friends, below random college roommates who barely knew our last name. They'd made their choice. Now I'd make mine. Monday morning, I sorted every piece of evidence into a polished, airtight packet. The trust documents, the spending history, my grandfather's clause about fairness, the emails from Janet, the guest roster with its 118 names, the resort's actual capacity numbers. It all fit together perfectly. Even a barely competent lawyer could win with this, and Daniel Chun was anything but mediocre. I called my attorney that same morning. Daniel Chun had been my mentor when I first started practicing law. He'd moved into trusts and estates work not long after, and he was one of the few people I trusted to be both blunt and fair. Let me make sure I have this right, he said after I laid everything out. Your parents are using trust money for this giant family event. One they intentionally left you out of? Yes. And you're both a trustee and a beneficiary? Correct. In that case, he said, this is a pretty straightforward breach. They can't spend trust money for the benefit of some trustees while excluding another. That violates their fiduciary obligations. What are my choices? You could file an objection with a trust administrator. Or if you're ready to go all in, you can request an emergency injunction to freeze trust spending until this is sorted out. Considering the event is 2 weeks away, a judge would hear it quickly. How quickly? If we filed today, maybe a hearing by the end of the week. If the judge thinks the claim has merit, they could issue a temporary restraining order stopping your parents from using trust funds for the retreat. I thought about that email from my mother, the cold dismissal, the fake story about capacity. 118 invited guests, but not me. File it, I said. File everything. Daniel moved fast. The emergency motion went out Tuesday afternoon. It included a breakdown of trust spending, the list of all 118 invitees, and the email that told me I wasn't welcome. It asked for an immediate freeze on all trust-funded retreat expenses until the court could hold a full hearing. The judge set the hearing for Friday morning. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my siblings either. I just waited. Thursday night my phone practically melted. My mother called 17 times in 2 hours. My father called 11. All 6 siblings texted non-stop. Sophie sent exactly the kind of message I expected. What the hell, Megan? You're trying to ruin the family retreat over what? A misunderstanding? Eli was harsher. You're being selfish. This is all about you. Tina at least seemed confused instead of furious. And what's happening? Mom is losing it. She says you're suing the family. I ignored all of them. Ryan and I made dinner, watched a movie, and went to bed. My phone kept buzzing on the nightstand like it was panicking for me. Friday morning we dressed carefully. Professional but not confrontational. Daniel met us outside the courtroom. Your whole family is inside, he murmured. This is going to be tense. Good, I said. The courtroom was packed. My parents sat front and center with their attorney. A jittery guy in a rumpled suit who clearly handled real estate deals, not trust litigation. Behind them sat my siblings and their spouses, a whole row of disappointed stares. My mom's face was blotchy and swollen from crying. My dad looked ready to fling a chair at me. Judge Judith Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, opened the hearing. Daniel laid out our argument cleanly and calmly. The trust rules, the spending records, the massive guest list, the exclusion email, the resort's actual capacity. Your Honor, he said, this is a blatant breach of fiduciary duty. The trust managers are using trust assets to host an event that pointedly excludes one of the trustees and beneficiaries. They claim space limitations, yet the resort still has 82 open beds. This is discriminatory and an abuse of trust funds. My parents' attorney stammered through some clumsy explanation involving family disagreements and misunderstandings. He tried to insist I was overreacting to a simple lack of space. Judge Morrison held up a hand. Counsel, I reviewed the exhibits. The resort has 82 empty beds. Where exactly is this space limitation you're talking about? Well, Your Honor, the family wanted everyone to be comfortable, and with so many guests, 118 guests, she cut in, including friends, golf partners, and book club members, but not the petitioner, who happens to be a trustee and beneficiary of the trust paying for the entire event. She peered over her glasses at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, perhaps you can explain why trust money should fund an event that intentionally excludes one of your children? My mother suddenly stood, ignoring her attorney's frantic whispering. Your Honor, with respect, Megan has pulled away from this family. She turned her back on the family business. She treats us like we're beneath her. This retreat is meant to bring us together, and frankly, she doesn't contribute to that. We thought it would be best for everyone if she stayed home this year. The room went completely silent. Judge Morrison didn't raise her voice, but something in her expression went distinctly colder. Mrs. Thompson, that is exactly the issue here. A family trust is a legal structure with obligations, not a tool you can wield to punish the children you're disappointed in. You don't get to spend trust money to exclude a beneficiary, just because you don't approve of their career. She turned to her clerk. I'm issuing a temporary restraining order. All trust spending connected to the Mountain Ridge Resort retreat is frozen as of this moment. In addition, if the retreat is going to move forward using trust funds, then Megan Thompson and her spouse must be formally invited and given the same access to every amenity and activity as all other guests. The Thompsons have 72 hours to comply or cancel the event. My mother made a sound halfway between a cry and a shriek. But Your Honor, their attorney protested, the retreat is in 8 days. If they cancel now, then I suggest your clients extend a proper invitation to their daughter. Judge Morrison replied sharply. This hearing is adjourned. I expect an update within 72 hours. Her gavel cracked against the bench. My mom was sobbing now, my dad holding her arm like she might collapse. My brothers and sisters stared at me. Some furious, some stunned, some with something that almost looked like respect. We slipped out through a side door. Daniel was beaming. "That was flawless," he said. "Judge Morrison doesn't play around with fiduciary violations." My phone started ringing before we even reached the parking lot. I shut it off. The next 3 days were chaos, but only for my family. I heard everything secondhand from Tina, who had apparently decided she was on my team now. Saturday morning, Mom canceled her spa day and cried for hours. Dad's crunching numbers trying to see if they can pay for the retreat themselves. Spoiler, they can't. Saturday night, family meeting at the house. Total meltdown. Eli says, "You're tearing the family apart." Sophie says, "You're always so dramatic." Daniel actually defended you. Said maybe you weren't wrong. Sunday afternoon, Mom's having a full meltdown. Dad's panicked about the money. Some extended relatives heard about the court thing and want answers. Sunday night, update, they're going to invite you. Dad emailed their lawyer. Mom's locked in her room. Monday morning a new email came in, this time from my father. "Megan, you and Ryan are invited to attend the family retreat. Cabin assignment attached." Dad. It wasn't warm. It wasn't apologetic. It was an invitation and nothing else. Ryan read it over my shoulder. "So, are we actually going?" I sat with the question for a moment. The retreat was 5 days away. I could decline. Make my point. Let them stew. That would have been the easy revenge. Or I could show up. "Yes," I said. "We're going." "Are you sure?" "It's going to be painfully awkward." "Absolutely." They tried to cut me out. They lied. They chose golf buddies over their own kid. I'm not giving them the satisfaction of thinking they chased me off. Ryan smiled slowly. "I love it when you get like this." We reached Mountain Ridge Resort Friday afternoon. It looked exactly as it always had. Wide open lawns, rustic cabins circling the central lodge, mountains shooting up behind everything like a postcard. Under different circumstances, it would have been a dream. Janet was at the check-in desk, clipboard in hand. She looked relieved when she spotted me. "Cabin 7, just like the email said. Honestly, you've got one of the best views here." Then she leaned closer. "Your mom asked that your cabin be placed on the opposite end of the resort from the main family cabins." Of course she did. "Just so you know, a lot of guests are talking about the hearing. Not everyone agrees with your parents." That was something at least. Ryan and I settled into our cabin. It was beautiful, stone fireplace, cozy living room, a deck that looked out over a small lake. In any other situation it would have felt romantic. "What's the plan?" Ryan asked. "We go to everything. Every meal. Every event. Every group activity. We're polite, friendly, completely pleasant. And we act like absolutely nothing is wrong." He grinned. "That'll drive your mom insane." Exactly. Dinner was in the main lodge. A huge buffet, long shared tables, the usual setup. We walked in right on time. Not early. Not late. Conversations dipped as we entered. My parents sat at the head table with Adam and his wife. My mom's face tightened. My dad gave a stiff nod. Ryan and I sat with Daniel and his family. Daniel's wife, Amanda, smiled warmly. "Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," I said lightly. The whole meal felt stiff. People kept staring at us, murmuring. Still, we chatted with Daniel and Amanda and kept things breezy. Near the end of dinner, Sophie came over with her husband, Mark. "Can we talk?" she asked, somewhere between irritated and curious. "Sure." I pulled up a chair. "Look, I'm not pretending to understand the whole legal situation," she said, crossing her arms. "But Mom's miserable and everything feels awkward now. Did you really have to bring lawyers into this?" I set my fork down. "Sophie, they deliberately shut me out of a family event paid for with trust money I have a legal right to. They lied about why. They invited 118 people, including strangers, but not me. What exactly would you have done?" She opened her mouth, then shut it again. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "I just think families should keep things private," Sophie said at last. "I agree," I said evenly. Which is exactly why I was so surprised when they chose to handle things by sending me a stiff, formal email cutting me out of the family altogether. She didn't have anything to say to that. After a long, uncomfortable pause, she and Mark backed away. The rest of the night played out much the same. Some relatives avoided us completely, while others came by with different mixes of curiosity, irritation, or quiet support. Tina hugged me tightly at one point and whispered that she was glad I showed up, because what our parents did was awful. My parents didn't speak to us once. Saturday was packed with activities, a morning hike, lake time in the afternoon, and a big bonfire that night. Ryan and I joined everything. We smiled, participated, made small talk, and played our roles. It was exhausting, but we kept at it. At the bonfire, one of my dad's golf friends, a loud guy named Richard, plopped down beside me. "So you're the daughter who sued," he said bluntly. I filed an emergency motion about misuse of trust funds. I corrected him. "That's a little different. Your parents said there wasn't room for you." "The resort had 82 empty beds," I said. "There was plenty of room." He blinked at that, clearly processing. "Huh. They made it sound like the place was overflowing. It wasn't." He stood a moment later and drifted toward the other golf guys, talking in low tones and gesturing back toward my parents. Word was spreading. Sunday morning, Tina found me in the lodge bathroom. "The tide's turning," she whispered. "A bunch of people are questioning why you weren't invited. Richard's been telling everyone about the empty beds. Aunt Carol's furious. She said if there was room, you should have been included from the start. Even Eli's wife told me what Mom and Dad did was harsh." "How are they taking it?" I asked. "Not great. Mom's barely left her cabin and Dad snaps at anyone who brings it up. I think they're realizing it looks terrible." Later that afternoon, my mother finally approached me. We were near the lake when she marched over, shoulders squared like she was bracing for impact. "I need to speak with you," she said stiffly. Ryan immediately stood. "I'll give you 2 minutes." Once he stepped away, she sat on the bench beside me. We stared at the water for a long, silent stretch. "You've made your point," she said at last. "Everyone's talking about all of it, the hearing, the space issue, everything. You've humiliated your father and me." "I didn't set out to embarrass you," I replied calmly. "I just wanted to be included in my own family. You could have called us. You could have talked to us. Instead, you ran straight to lawyers." I turned toward her. "Mom, you sent me a formal email excluding me. You lied about the reason. When I found out the truth, that you invited more than 100 people but somehow didn't have space for your own daughter, what exactly should I have done? Asked politely to be reconsidered? Begged to come?" Her face flushed. "You've always been dramatic." "I'm dramatic? You told Janet I needed to be taught a lesson about loyalty. You were punishing me for not joining the family business by leaving me out of the retreat, and you paid for it with trust money. That's a breach of fiduciary duty." She went quiet, and when she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "I didn't think you'd care that much. You've been distant. You picked your career over us. You hardly call or visit. I honestly thought you might be relieved to skip it." Her honesty surprised me, even if the logic didn't. "Choosing a different career path doesn't mean I don't love you all," I said carefully. "It doesn't mean I want to be shut out. You assumed independence meant I didn't care. You never asked. You just decided." She sighed. "Your father and I worked so hard to build something for everyone. When you walked away, it felt like you were rejecting us. It wasn't a rejection of you. It was choosing my own life. I'm good at what I do. I'm happy. That should be enough." She brushed at her eyes. "I suppose we didn't handle this well. You think?" A faint smile flickered across her face. "You're a lot like your father, stubborn, strategic. He's been saying for 2 days that you outmaneuvered us completely. I learned from the best." We sat there quietly for a while. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. A small break in the tension. "Will you come to dinner tonight?" she asked. "At the head table. Your father and I want you there. Ryan too?" "Of course." That evening, we sat at the head table for the first time all weekend, and people definitely noticed. Conversations shifted, shoulders loosened, and the room felt a little less tense. My father raised his glass. "To family," he said, looking straight at me. "All of us." It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. The rest of the retreat passed without any major issues. My parents stayed a bit distant but civil. My siblings gradually softened, especially as the whole story spread. By Tuesday when we left, Daniel had invited us to visit in the fall, and Tina had already created a group chat with me about her upcoming birthday plans. On the drive home, Ryan squeezed my hand. Most people would have just skipped the retreat, he said. Most people aren't as stubborn as I am. True, he laughed. But seriously, Meg, you stood up for yourself. You made them see you. That took guts. I thought of my mother by the lake, admitting she thought I wouldn't care, assuming independence meant indifference. I just wanted them to know I still want to be included, I said quietly. Even if we're different, even if I disappointed them, I'm still their daughter. I still deserve a seat at the table. Well, you definitely have one now, Ryan said, and I couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, I guess I finally do. 3 weeks later, a formal letter arrived from my parents' attorney. They were proposing changes to the trust management setup, clearer rules for how expenses were approved, defined rights for beneficiaries, the whole thing. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note from my dad, written in that careful block handwriting he'd used for as long as I could remember. Megan, we've spoken with Daniel Chan about proper trust procedures going forward. We want to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. And we want you to know your place in this family was never in doubt. Even when we failed to show it, we're still learning. Thank you for teaching us, Dad. I filed the letter with the rest of my growing pile of family paperwork. It wasn't perfect. Nothing heals instantly, but it was a beginning. And sometimes a beginning is enough. The next year's retreat invitation showed up in March, 9 months early. It was addressed to Megan and Ryan Lewis in my mother's handwriting, not some impersonal announcement. Inside was a short note. Save the dates. Cabin 7 is reserved for you. With love, Mom and Dad. I smiled and marked the dates on our calendar. Because family, with all its messiness and frustration and unexpected wounds, is still family. And sometimes the only way to hold your seat at the table is to fight for it. Even if that fight involves emergency motions and courtroom drama. Maybe especially then. When the next retreat finally rolled around, Ryan and I drove up the winding mountain road toward the resort. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something like peace. Not the fragile kind that dissolves under guilt or obligation, but a steady sort of peace that comes from standing your ground and keeping your self-respect. Patricia greeted us at the lodge with a bright smile. Cabin 7 again, she said cheerfully. Your parents made sure it was ready first this year. Did they? I asked, half amused. She nodded. Your mom even had flowers delivered. Said they were your favorite. Sure enough, when we stepped into the cabin, a vase of fresh peonies sat on the table beside a handwritten card. Welcome home, Meg. Let's make this year a better one. Love, Mom. I stood there for a moment, letting the words sink in, feeling that strange blend of forgiveness and caution swirl through me. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest thing my mother could manage, and it felt sincere. Ryan slipped his arms around my shoulders. Looks like she's trying, he murmured. Yeah, I said softly. She really is. That evening, dinner was in the Grand Lodge as usual, but everything felt different, lighter, warmer. My parents greeted us at the door, both trying to look calm and failing just a little. My dad shook Ryan's hand and then mine. Glad you're here, he said simply. Me too, I answered. My mother hugged me next, hesitant at first and then suddenly real, her arms tightening around me like she didn't want to let go. You look beautiful, she whispered. So do you, I told her and meant it. Throughout dinner, there were no whispers this time, no icy glances. My brothers and sisters chatted like they used to, telling old stories and laughing. Tina announced she was planning a trip abroad, and even Eli, usually quick to criticize, was in a decent mood. At one point, Daniel lifted his glass to Megan for keeping us honest. Laughter rippled through the tables, followed by a small wave of applause. My cheeks flushed, but I couldn't help smiling. Ryan squeezed my hand under the table. Later that night, after the lodge had emptied out and the sky filled with stars, I stepped onto the deck overlooking the lake. The air smelled like pine and distant campfire smoke, cool and clean. My reflection shimmered on the water, steady and calm, and I thought about everything that had happened. The exclusion, the hearing, the hurt, and the slow climb back toward something resembling reconciliation. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider orbiting my own family. I felt like I belonged again. When Ryan joined me on the deck, he wrapped an arm around my waist. You know, he said quietly, I think your grandfather would have been proud. Of what? Of you. For holding the family accountable. For remembering what fairness actually looks like. I leaned against him. Maybe. He always did care about fairness. And I think he'd be glad the trust is finally being run the way he intended, and that his granddaughter doesn't shy away from a fight. I smiled a little. That too. The next morning, my parents gathered everyone in the main hall for a family meeting, a tradition that had faded over the years. To my surprise, Dad handed things over to me first. Meg, he said, you understand this trust better than anyone. Why don't you walk your brothers and sisters through the changes? I blinked. Seriously? He nodded. Seriously. So I did. I explained the new setup: transparent accounting, yearly trustee meetings, written consent for major expenses, and a rule guaranteeing equal access for all beneficiaries. My siblings actually listened. For the first time, I didn't feel like the black sheep explaining herself. I felt like someone who had earned a place in the leadership of our family. When I finished, Mom stood. I know last year was painful, she said softly. We handled things poorly, terribly. But if these changes mean no one ever feels left out again, then maybe the lesson was worth it. The applause was gentle but genuine. Afterward, Tina hugged me fiercely. You did it, she whispered. You actually changed how this family works. I laughed. Guess I taught them a thing or two about fiduciary duty. That evening, Ryan and I wandered down to the lake again. The sunset turned the water gold and soft pink, and families were gathered around the fire pit, laughing and sharing stories. This time, Ryan said, it really does feel like a family retreat. And for the first time, I agreed. I agreed. And no lawyers involved this time. Yet Ryan teased. I laughed and nudged him with my shoulder. Let's hope it stays that way. As we stood there looking out over the water, something settled in me. Something deeper than satisfaction or relief. I realized the whole fight hadn't really been about an invitation, or the trust money, or even proving a point. It had been about respecting myself, about reminding the people who raised me that being independent doesn't mean being disloyal, that you can love your family and still draw lines, and that sometimes the only way to stay connected is to stand firm instead of shrinking back. The next morning, while we packed our bags, I glanced out across the mountain ridge glowing in the early light. The air was cool and clean, the kind that makes everything feel like a fresh start. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing myself for the next family event. I was actually looking forward to it. On the drive home, I looked back at the resort one last time and couldn't help smiling. Because family doesn't heal when you stay quiet. It heals when you speak up, when you push back, and when you refuse to fade into the background just to keep the peace. And that year, I didn't just reclaim my place at the table, I made sure it would stay mine for good.